And that, my friends, is how America was made great once again. Breaking at this hour, Jimmy Sengenberger is currently at the crossroads of politics and economics. Radio broadcaster master, now the celeb on the web. He's the smarty of the party. He's in cahoots with the grassroots. Jimmy at the Crossroads brings you thought-provoking commentary, hard-hitting interviews, original satire, and the best bumper music known to man. Jimmy at the Crossroads!
Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix, I said. Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. People want answers, they want to understand. They come to the crossroads and Jimmy gives them the plan. I said, gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. Come on, Jimmy, what you got?
Hello, my friends, and welcome to another edition of Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, your host for the program, bringing you engaging, intelligent talk, Sang style, once again, in partnership with the Washington Examiner on this Tuesday, June 16th. And boy, do we have a lot to talk about today, particularly in regards to the Supreme Court and several rulings laid down, including a couple that basically were the court saying we're not going to take up these cases. We're going to talk about that with Ilya Shapiro, who is director of the Center for Constitutional Studies at the Cato Institute. And I'm looking forward to talking with Shapiro about the Bostock decision dealing with LGBT workplace discrimination, as well as the gun rights cases that were not heard by the court. They declined to hear, and also the cases regarding qualified immunity, or the case regarding qualified immunity. We will talk with Ilya Shapiro about that coming up here in just a little bit on Jimmy at the Crossroads. But first, do you remember several weeks ago here on this very show when I shared a Politico story about Joe Biden supposedly saying that Donald Trump was going to try to avoid the election as best he could, that he was going to try to postpone the November election? President Donald Trump was then asked about that very question. Here in Cut 5, this is several weeks ago, in which he couldn't believe that Biden would actually say that.
Question about the 2020 election.
Yeah.
Your likely Democratic opponent, Joe Biden, recently suggested that you were considering changing the date of the election, that you might try something like that. That's my first question. The same question.
I never even thought of changing the date of the election. Why would I do that? November 3rd. It's a good number. No, I look forward to that election, and that was just made-up propaganda, not by him, but by some of the many people that are working, writing little statements. I see all the time, statement made, you say some statement made per Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe. He didn't make those statements, but somebody did. But they said he made it. No, let him know I'm not thinking about it at all, not at all.
So at the time, I came on this program and I said, President Trump is giving Biden too much credit. I believe Biden made that statement. Well, it's pretty clear now that Biden believes that, or at least has been saying that sort of thing to all sorts of people for weeks now. And it escalated even more. Here in Cut 1 is Joe Biden on the daily social distancing show with Trevor Noah, suggesting not that the president might move the election from November 3rd, postpone it, but that the president might just work to steal the election.
This president's going to try to steal this election. This is a guy who said that all mail-in ballots are fraudulent, direct voting by mail, while he sits behind the desk in the Oval Office and writes his mail-in ballot to vote in the primary. This is a guy, you have 23, I believe it is, states have passed over 82 pieces of legislation, making it harder for people to vote. Harder. That's why we're putting together a major initiative of lawyers to go out and make sure that we're in every single district in the country to patrol this. We need, if I'm president, and this is what their worries, if I'm president, we're going to have same-day registration. The report was in Pennsylvania, they were still counting votes. We may not know, quote, this is the sort of implicit threat. We might not know who won Pennsylvania in a general election until a month after the election.
Wow.
What do you think that this is about with Trump?
A couple of quick thoughts on what Biden just said there before we get to the big claim. First of all, we didn't cut that video. Mid-statement somewhere, The Daily Show, Comedy Central, sliced and edited. You'll see that in the next clip as well. Edited what Biden said, presumably to clean it up in some way. That's the only conclusion I could draw. Why would you cut mid-statement there? In an awkward way. Then also, same-day voter registration is actually the problem. We're here in Colorado. In Colorado, where we have mail voting, and as viewers of this program know, I'm supportive of mail voting if it's done right, if you have the leg room and the time to get it set up right. But one of the biggest problems we have still in place here in Colorado, vis-a-vis mail voting, is same-day voter registration and verifying the legitimacy of those voters. Moreover, mail ballots can take longer. In Arapahoe County, Colorado, where I live, we have an incompetent clerk and recorder, Joan Lopez, who went days longer than she should have over these ballots, but that's another story. Nevertheless, that was Biden saying that President Trump might try to steal, not might, will try to steal the election. He's going to try to steal the election. Well, then it gets worse. Here's Joe Biden escalating it even further when pressed by Trevor Noah as to whether or not the president would actually leave office if he loses to Biden.
And let me ask you this, and I know this is a strange question to ask an American politician, maybe easier around the world, but have you ever considered what would happen if the election result came out as you being the winner and Trump refused to leave?
Yes, I have. I was so damn proud. Here you have 4 chiefs of staff coming out and ripping the skin off of Trump. And you have so many rank and file military personnel saying, whoa, we're not a military state. This is not who we are. I promise you, I'm absolutely convinced they will escort him from the White House with great dispatch.
So first of all, another odd cut. He said, yes, I have, and then totally went on to some other statement that then led him to say, I'm confident that they will remove him, walk him out of the White House. That kind of language doesn't just disturb me, but it disgusts me. And here's why. We are at arguably the single most divided point in this country's history since 1968. At least 1968. Some would say it's even more divisive right now, the time that we're going through, than 1968. We have had peaceful protests all across the country for weeks, first over lockdowns from overzealous government power and authority, and people losing their livelihoods, being told your lives must be set aside because trust us, the government, we're the experts. Or then protests over the murder of an unarmed black man in George Floyd, and then the riots even. We've seen riots across the country that have developed. We have seen people now who will not talk to one another, to family members, to friends, because of political disagreements or policy disagreements. If you go into dating apps, you'll constantly say, if you don't support this movement or that movement, or if you voted for Trump, no thanks. We saw an op-ed in the New York Times last week that said, literally said, that you should tell your family or friends that they shouldn't give you a call unless they donate to Black Lives Matter or support those other movements, not just in words, but in deeds. Don't talk with your friends or family. Tell them not to give you a call. Friendships being destroyed over political disagreements. We are at a fever pitch, too, in this country, vis-a-vis the tension. And, I mean, you can it's so thick you can cut it with a knife right now. And Joe Biden, the Democratic nominee now, not officially, but he's got all the delegates he needs, former Vice President of the United States, a credible individual, is literally suggesting on TV to an audience that already is like fearful over President Trump becoming a massive dictator. By the way, when you look at what Gretchen Whitmer's done in Michigan, what Phil Murphy's done in New Jersey, what Ralph Northam's done in Virginia, they don't bat eyes about that, which is much more concerning than what President Trump has been doing. But nevertheless, he's stoking fears over something absolutely insane. The idea that President Trump would actually think if he loses, oh, I'm not going to leave, you're going to have to escort me out, is patently absurd, without basis. And Joe Biden is reckless and irresponsible for such a claim. And then finally, let's go to cut 3. This claim was taken seriously, as it should be, but seriously by MSNBC, but also realistically by MSNBC. Here's a clip from the other day.
I wanted to go back to that moment a little bit because I don't think a lot of us just understand what that moment would mean for this country if there isn't a peaceful transfer of power. And as Joe Biden, I think the alarming thing in that interview is he answered that question seriously. That was a serious question from Trevor Noah, and Joe Biden answered it seriously.
That's enough. He took it seriously. Oh, my gosh, we need to take it seriously because Joe Biden's taking it seriously. Exactly my point. Exactly my point. There are people now who are understandably looking to Joe Biden as the Democratic standard bearer to bring it to Trump. Whether or not he can is one question. Another question is about the way in which he's going to do it. And these kinds of claims, in an interview that, by the way, clearly was edited in some awkward ways by The Daily Show on Comedy Central, Joe Biden, who wants to be president of the United States, who's a former vice president of the United States, recklessly stokes fears that President Trump not only will try to steal the election, not only try to move the election to postpone it, but if he loses, that he will not leave. It's hard to find the words for how wrong that is, especially at this heated and divisive moment. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger. You're watching Jimmy at the Crossroads, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. In a few moments, we will be joined by Ilya Shapiro of the Cato Institute, director of their Center for Constitutional Studies, to talk about the Supreme Court decisions yesterday, including the Bostock decision on LGBTQ workplace discrimination and gun rights and also qualified immunity. So lots going on there. But first, we have a brand new program you're going to hear about first here today from this video. This is the first time it's being seen publicly. A brand new initiative we're calling the Crossroads Club. Stay with us, check it out, see what we've got here, and then we'll be back on the other side with Ilya Shapiro. Hey everybody, Jimmy Sengenberger here, host of the talk show Jimmy at the Crossroads, which I publish online in partnership with the Washington Examiner. You know, a lot of people ask me, what is the Crossroads? Why the Crossroads? Well, our show is cross-topical. It's at the intersection of politics and economics and other topics as well. we bring on a great intersection of A-lister guests, from Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban to podcaster Dave Rubin, EPA Administrator Andrew Wheeler, Sidney Powell, who of course is Michael Flynn's lawyer, and also Dinesh D'Souza, noted documentarian and author. The show's cross-generational, reaching millennials and Gen Z, boomers and Gen X. We bring seriousness and also fun, with humor, comical videos, and more. And of course, we stand at the crossroads, sometimes playing the blues. Jimmy at the Crossroads is a different kind of talk show. It's not an attack program meant to own the libs. There are plenty of those, and they do give young conservatives the confidence to know that they're not alone and that what they believe is right. But it's not just about destroying the left and winning the argument. It's about winning people over. That's why Jimmy at the Crossroads is about growing the conservative movement, finding solutions, and helping to bring our country back to basics: free markets, limited government, individual liberty, and personal responsibility. In a moment, I'll tell you all about my new Crossroads Club that I know you'll want to be a part of. But first, take a look at some of what we've done here at the Crossroads.
You're an entrepreneur.
I'll give you the alternative.
You're an entrepreneur. You've got to create 30 million jobs over 3 years.
Yeah.
Tell me what companies can do that.
So, first
Tell me
of
what
all,
20 or 50 or 100 companies can do that.
I can't tell you a specific companies that can do that because I don't know. In fact,
Or investors.
But
Pick
I
the
don't.
greatest investors of
Right.
all time.
Well, but I don't presume to think that I know who's going to be the best investor, the best company to do that. Just as I don't think the government is, that I can presume that the government's going to be effective to do that.
Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics. We're for all generations. Oh, what a great mix, I said.
Has been on a determined campaign to convince the world that everything is hunky-dory. And when the government actually spends so much effort trying to convince you of something, you got to be very suspicious.
Your lawyers don't tell you even all the evidence that the government has given them, the few meager disclosures that were made literally at the 11th hour after you'd already been coerced into pleading guilty.
Hours of video evidence of Nancy Pelosi coming up on your porches and jujitsuing your precious packages, while Chuck Schumer waits in the street in the getaway van because he's too afraid to be a man and do his own dirty work.
Come on, Jimmy, what you got?
Is it scary that YouTube and Twitter and Facebook have this kind of power over us? Of course it is. But you know what? These things didn't always exist, and they won't always exist. David beat Goliath. The little guy can beat the big guy.
So we have to figure out ways to fight in which we are able to have that kind of reach. We can build our own megaphones. And this is a little bit of a longer term project. It goes beyond Trump's re-election because it affects every election.
I'm good, man. It's a partnership. We're like this, Jimmy. I got you.
Jimmy, can I tell you that I've done about 200 shows in the last 3 weeks for this book tour? This has been by far my favorite interview.
And that, my friends, is how America was made great once again. Breaking at this hour, Jimmy Sengenberger is currently at the crossroads of politics and economics. Radio broadcaster master. Now the celeb on the web. He's the smarty of the party. He's in cahoots with the grassroots. Jimmy at the Crossroads brings you thought-provoking commentary, hard-hitting interviews, original satire, and the best bumper music known to man. Jimmy at the Crossroads.
I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense.
Now that you've seen some of what we're doing, I want you to become a part of it. That's why I'm so excited to tell you about my new Crossroads Club, where individuals and businesses alike come together to support real conversation that moves the ball forward for the conservative movement. As part of the Crossroads Club, you'll be the bedrock of making this possible, something proactive, not just reactive. And depending on your membership level, you'll get some tremendous perks. Things like my official Jimmy at the Crossroads harmonica engraved with your name on it. Chocolate harmonicas, delicious. Exclusive discounts or free tickets to special edition webinars, online video courses, and believe it or not, public events. They're coming back, folks. Trust me. Believe me. Plus, you may get a unique opportunity to share your own personal video message with my audience. Also, the business memberships offer great opportunities to promote your business. For example, the business leaders level will get a complimentary live read commercial that I will personally present on the show once a month. But even more fundamentally, you'll be a part of a community of patriots united to save America. Don't miss out on this unique and exciting opportunity. My friends, I don't need to tell you that America is at a crossroads right now. If you believe in advancing liberty, if you believe that the Constitution makes our nation exceptional, and if you believe in me and what I'm striving to do here, I ask you to join me. Join us at the Crossroads. Log on to members.jimmyatthecrossroads.com and become a Crossroads Club member today. Thanks for your support.
And how about that new Crossroads Club? Don't forget, fans, join the Jimmy at the Crossroads Club today. Let's get back to your host of the Crossroads, Mr. Sang Style himself, Jimmy Sengenberger.
I'm Jimmy Sengenberger. Good to be with you once again here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Nathan Matouche, producer extraordinaire, working that Matouche magic. In addition to that golden intro voice, welcome back to Jimmy at the Crossroads. Indeed, I am Jimmy Sengenberger, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. Such a pleasure and a privilege to be with you. Once again, as always, bringing you engaging, intelligent talk, Sang style. Yes, please do. Just unveiled. Members.jimmyatthecrossroads.com. Join the Crossroads Club. And also, if you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/JimmyAtTheCrossroads, as well as follow me on Twitter. You see right there, at Sang Center, Sang with an E, not an A, Center on Twitter. And like the Facebook page, Jimmy Sengenberger, media personality. Plus, follow our friends at the Examiner, WashingtonExaminer.com. And on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube as well. So yesterday was quite the day as far as Supreme Court proceedings go. We got several different decisions announced, including a few non-decisions, that is to say where the court's saying we're not going to take up these particular cases. And some significant matters were before the court. Gun rights issues, police qualified immunity, and of course the one that did yield a decision, yesterday's Bostock case, which deals with LGBTQ discrimination in the workplace. Let's talk about these three matters with the director of the Center for Constitutional Studies at the Cato Institute, Ilya Shapiro, who I'm so pleased to welcome to the show today. Ilya, welcome to the program, my friend. Good to have you.
Good to be on, Jimmy. I was convinced by your ad. Could I get a complimentary Crossroads Club membership?
Let me think about that, but I'd much rather you go ahead, take the initiative, and sign up yourself, Ilya. That would be a wonderful thing. If you really were won over, that's what you could do.
Well, at least when you have your first in-person meeting, you need to serve Sengen burgers, and I would like one of those burgers, please.
All ease, all the time. If you come, I will definitely give you a free Sengen burger. That is for sure.
All right.
I won't charge you a dime for that, not even a penny. All right, Ilya, so I appreciate it. It's good to have you here. Quite a day yesterday for the court, huh?
Well, this is basically the start of the silly period or the busy period these next couple of weeks. Who knows how long it'll take them, whether they'll push into July because they were delayed by the pandemic, but almost every case they have left, I think 18 or 16 of them, is pretty big time.
So let's talk for a moment and start with the one that has really garnered the most attention, I think, of late, and that is this Bostock decision. Tell us about the basic facts of the matter and what this case was about and the overall decision, and then we're going to dive into some of the particulars.
We're about to be visited by my 2-year-old, one of these things here.
Life in the COVID era, Ilya Shapiro.
Yeah, Bostock is a series
Well, first of all, you got your kid on the screen. Let's put him on full, though we can't see him too much. What's his name? Introduce us.
This is Charlie.
Hey, Charlie.
Charlie's on live on a video radio show here with Jimmy Sengenberger in Denver. So this is his first media appearance, actually.
Charlie,
so,
what do you think about the Supreme
Charlie?
Court? Hi, Charlie.
All right, buddy. Go to Grandma.
Adorable kid. Absolutely adorable.
Can you turn my red light on? I even have a red light on. But anyway, the lock's busted on my. Anyway,
it's
here we
supposed
go.
to
This
give
is COVID era broadcasting.
Exactly. Don't worry about it. Just power right out through. Go ahead.
Right. So these are 3 cases. Bostock happens to be the one with the lowest case number. That's why the decision is based on that. But basically, people who are fired from their job in the private sector because they are gay or, in one case, transgender. And the issue is, it's not a constitutional rights case. This is Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits in relevant part discrimination in employment decisions on the basis of or because of sex. So the whole issue here is whether because of sex includes because of sexual orientation or because of gender identity. That's the case.
So in other words, it's a matter of the text of a statute, and it comes down to one word above all else.
That's right. What is the meaning of sex? It's a big word. It's a loaded word, as we all know, and ultimately it's a tough call. I wrote a piece in National Review. I'm still sort of scratching my head about which side is right. Ultimately, it was a 6-3 decision with Justice Gorsuch and Chief Justice Roberts joining the liberals, holding that Title VII does include protections against discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, because the word sex includes all these considerations. If sexual orientation as a matter of same-sex attraction, gender identity is whether you identify as the sex that you're marked down on when you're born. These things, not necessarily what people were expecting when they legislated in 1964, but this is not a matter of legislative intent or what those on the left tend to like, the purpose of the statute. Forget the text. What is the purpose of the statute? No, it's not that. It's this word sex, which can be read, and indeed Gorsuch, for the majority, says is best read to include these other aspects of sexuality. And in dissent, there was the 3 in dissent were an opinion by Alito joined by Thomas, and then a separate dissent by Kavanaugh. Alito said, well, you're getting a little too cute here, because even if someone is being fired because of their same-sex attraction, the boss can have a policy and fire someone without regard to knowing what their sex is. Say you have someone named Chris or Sam or Pat, and this person would be fired if they were gay, regardless of whether if they were male or female, and this person would not be fired if they were straight, regardless of whether they were male or female. And so that's the straightforward way of reading that. And Justice Kavanaugh, I think this is ultimately the decision that I feel most close to. He basically says Gorsuch's textual reading, they're all textualists. We're not arguing from different kind of, what are our values or what have you, or what should be the policy. But Kavanaugh says Gorsuch is being too literal. That is, you're supposed to read the statute, the text, for its ordinary meaning. And even now, even in our enlightened progressive 2020, if you wrote a statute saying on the basis of sex, you would mean sex, you would mean male, female. You wouldn't include sexual orientation, gender identity. Those would be more specific terms. You're basically ripping this out of the political branches. But that's what we have. And again, this is a statutory case, and it was a closer case than either side made it out to be.
So let's take a step back here. You've mentioned textualism and textualists a few times. For those who may not have studied anything about the Constitution, what does that mean about or Constitution or the law? Because this is not about the Constitution. What does textualism mean?
Textualism is simply applying the text. 30, 40 years ago, judges would only apply the text if the purpose of the statute was unclear. I mean, it's all backward. They use the text to illuminate the meaning or to illuminate the purpose of the statute. Now, this is perhaps even more than with originalism, this is one of Justice Scalia's and Robert Bork's big contributions, is that we actually care about the statute. Certainly conservatives do, and even someone like Justice Kagan has used the tools of this trade. And so it's slightly different than originalism. Again, there are different background presumptions because Congress can change statutes, Congress cannot change the Constitution. But the idea is you're trying to get at the best meaning of what the text on the page is. And Gorsuch basically says, look, this might be a crazy result. This might be a surprising result. But I'm going to hold Congress to the letter of the law. And if they don't like it, that's fine. Just change that law.
Again, Ilya Shapiro at the Cato Institute is our guest here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. So I want to read a snippet from Alito's decision that has caught particular attention, where he said, Justice Alito, the court attempts to pass off its decision as the inevitable product of the textualist school of statutory interpretation, championed by our late colleague, Justice Scalia, but no one should be fooled. The court's opinion is like a pirate ship. It sails under a textualist flag, but what it actually represents is a theory of statutory interpretation that Justice Scalia excoriated, the theory that courts should update old statutes so that they better reflect the current values of society. And he's particularly citing Scalia because Scalia is perhaps the most renowned textualist ever to sit on the Supreme Court and one of the most renowned legal scholars of textualism that we've had in our country's history. What do you make of that particular aspect of Alito's dissent?
Yeah, I think that would have been better aimed had that opinion been written by Justice Ginsburg. Indeed, updating with policy preferences or with what a better reading is or something like that. Because I don't think that's what Gorsuch is doing at all. He's, you can disagree with him on your understanding of the text, but I don't think it's accurate to say that he's not being a textualist, which is why I prefer Kavanaugh's dissent to Alito's. On the Scalia point, by the way, there's a bit of irony here because in 1989, Justice Scalia wrote an opinion called Oncale, O-N-C-A-L-E. It was a unanimous Supreme Court opinion reading a sexual harassment statute for the first time to apply to male-on-male harassment, which everyone knew was not the purpose of the original statute. I don't remember the specific language, but anyway, this was Scalia in effect not bending, but being a good textualist and reaching what my colleague Walter Olson has called surprise plain meaning. And so, everybody would want to, of course, invoke Scalia in a textualist debate, but as I said, this is not so much about Gorsuch being a bad textualist as whether he's being too literal and taking the words out of the context in which they might be and what they would mean either in 1964 or even now.
So in terms of this decision, how significant really is it? Because it's dealing with one particular statute, it's dealing with one particular word in that particular statute, Ilya Shapiro.
Well, about half the states, maybe just under half, already had their own statutory protections for sexual orientation and gender identity. So it's not changing the law in the entire country, for one thing. For another, most big companies, even in states that don't require it, have already adopted such policies as well. You've heard of woke capitalism or woke corporations. Certainly the big companies already have that as well. And most small employers probably do as well. Couldn't care less one way or another. Where it really would affect is some that might have religious objections, some that just will get sued. They're not making a decision based on somebody's sexual orientation, but the person being fired or demoted or not hired is gay, and they're going to have to spend all this money proving that they decided to take that decision because the person was not performing well or somebody else was better or what have you. So it does kind of generate more income for employment lawyers. And then you have collateral effects. And this is something that Alito pointed out and made the servers of the Supreme Court, when everybody download this opinion, he appendices all these forms of federal government forms and other federal laws that use the term on the basis of or because of sex that will now potentially be litigated and potentially have these other protections read into them, which could open up litigation, including in things like women's sports or other areas of law that go beyond employment discrimination. But that's not a direct result that is yet to be litigated.
What about employers who do not want to hire, especially maybe churches or religion-tied institutions, who do not want to hire somebody who may be transgender or gay for religious reasons?
This is another case that's actually pending before the Supreme Court right now. There's what's called a ministerial exception for religious employers from all employment discrimination laws. The cases this term are not, little sisters of the poor that have an objection to abortifacients. I mean, that's a separate issue on administrative law. The case this term is about they don't want to apply the age discrimination laws. They don't want to apply. They fired someone, arguably, is the claim based on her getting ill and being out of the job too long. But there is this ministerial exemption from employment discrimination laws. It looks like David French made this point on Twitter last night that potentially there's going to be this of both LGBT rights and
take a step back for a second. I'm sorry to interrupt. For some reason, you cut out for a moment there, and I couldn't hear the summary of what you said about
right.
David French.
So what David French made the point is that it looks like the court might be going towards what's known as the Utah Compromise, what the Utah legislature put in, which is greater protections for the LGBT community, as well as protections or exemptions for religious employers and others.
A couple final questions on this topic, and then I definitely want to get into the other two real briefly with Ilya Shapiro, again, director of the Center for Constitutional Studies at the Cato Institute. Gorsuch, he was appointed by President Trump. There were many, certainly Republicans, who got on board voting for President Trump because they were like, hey, we need to get conservatives on the Supreme Court. You got Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. And one of the arguments on the political side people have been saying is, vote Trump because Gorsuch, because remember Gorsuch, remember Kavanaugh, that kind of thing. And now there are some who are saying, well, this shows that Gorsuch has betrayed what we expected him to be. I'm not going to ask you for your thoughts, obviously, on the politics of this, but in terms of Gorsuch, do you think that this says anything that folks who are more textualist, originalist, conservative, libertarian believers as far as approach to the Constitution were expecting of him? Should they be concerned?
No, I mean, they're getting what they wanted. They wanted an independent thinker who applies textualism and originalism wherever it goes, rather than being a result-oriented person that votes in lockstep like those justices on the left of the court tend to. I linked in my National Review piece an earlier op-ed I had about a year ago on USA Today showing statistically how much more the liberal bloc of 4 votes together. The Ginsburg 4 as opposed to the Roberts 5, as Senator Sheldon Whitehouse likes to assail them. And indeed, last Supreme Court term, each one of the 5 Republican-appointed justices joined the liberals at least once. And that shows their independence of thought and their different perspective. And they're all, not just result-oriented. And some conservatives will quibble with that, saying, no, we want the guaranteed conservative result. Forget it. The left is always going to paint us as being right-wing reactionaries. We might as well get the good results to go along with that. Again, that's a political argument, but this shows the independence of thought and the strong intellectual rigor of both Kavanaugh and Gorsuch.
But clearly there is a divide among advocates of textualism right now. What do you chalk this divide up to in particular? I mean, you yourself haven't really drawn a conclusion. Yeah,
it's a close case. I mean, look, it's not a slam dunk. It's not bigoted to say these protections weren't there, and it's not crazy to say they're not, because nobody in their right mind. Heck, Obama civil rights testified before Congress in legislation that would have provided these protections explicitly, saying they're not currently in Title VII. So are those Obama-era officials bigoted or short-sighted or bad lawyers or something. No, this is a close case, and as I said, there are good. This is not a slam dunk either way.
And just finally, in terms of we're all textualists now, do you really believe that all the liberals on the bench, because they signed up with this particular decision, are now textualists, Ilya Shapiro?
Not really, nor John Roberts, who, of course, hasn't met a statute he can't rewrite to achieve what he thinks, not as a particular policy result per se, but what he thinks will be more, legitimate for the court or something like that. He has his own goals.
You and I have talked about before how Roberts is very much an institutionalist, looking out for the institution of the court as Chief Justice. Okay, let's shift to a couple of different topics here in a few more minutes with you. Ilya Shapiro, again, our guest, director of the Center for Constitutional Studies at the Cato Institute. Let's start by talking about the gun rights cases.
That was quite a workout. I needed a glass of water.
You were on a bike ride before, right? So
That's right.
You still need to catch up and get hydrated. So let me ask you, Ilya Shapiro, about...
Let's just cycle through these cases, shall we?
Absolutely. So you're just full of puns. I mean, he's just trying for all the puns in the world today, folks. So in terms of gun rights, yesterday the Supreme Court declined to hear several different cases dealing with the constitutionally protected right to keep and bear arms. Okay, 10, more than just several. 10 cases that they declined on the Second Amendment. Ilya Shapiro, what's going on here?
They abdicated their responsibility to say what the law is. The first and only Second Amendment case that the court has taken up in the last 80 years is District of Columbia versus Heller in 2008, declaring an individual right to keep and bear arms, striking down D.C.'s absolute ban. 2 years later, in what's actually a 14th Amendment case, they extended that right to the states, McDonald versus Chicago. But they have not defined the scope of that right at all in 12 years. The lower courts have been all over the place, both in terms of what kind of regulations and restrictions are allowed and in what methodology to apply to figure out those kinds of questions. Disobedience or massive resistance to the right to keep and bear arms, really. And, the conventional wisdom was nobody could be sure of what Anthony Kennedy would do, and so they decided not to take all those cases. But finally, he's off, Kavanaugh's on. Just this term, they dismissed a case from New York as moot, 4 justices writing in dissent that it wasn't moot. And also, it's very important to take up this issue. And Roberts was on board there in Heller and in McDonald, so presumably that's 5. And yet, there were not the 4 votes to grant cert in any of these cases that present so many different issues, whether it's the right to carry or types of weapons that are outlawed, magazine clips, all sorts of things. And yet, I guess the 4 more conservative justices were so unsure of John Roberts, they decided to kick the can down the road. But I think the wiser course would have been, if they were unsure, would have been to grant one of them and force it, because at the very least, he would have expanded the scope somewhat and defined somewhat, made minimal changes. But again, begun that project of saying what the law is, rather than having a free-for-all in the courts below, just ignoring Heller, ignoring the Second Amendment.
Yeah, that's the concern here, is that if the Supreme Court doesn't make a final determination about many of these questions, then different states will operate in different ways, which it's hard to see.
It's not that they will. They have. They have.
Right.
In Maryland, Jersey, New York, California, short of a complete ban on firearms, you can do everything. There's no right to carry. There's restrict. I mean, it's in some states it's a may issue permit, and the may depends on whether you're a celebrity or a former police officer. Otherwise, the police chief won't approve your right to that firearm, regardless if you are a small woman or live in a crime-ridden area or anything like that. It's reading the right completely out. And again, I'm not saying substantive points of what the scope of the right should be, but the Supreme Court needs to give that guidance, needs to start developing this area of the law.
Yeah, we're talking about a right that is protected in the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution, which means that there is some purview for the federal Constitution in that regard, which means that there are these particular questions, especially given, for example, the Heller-McDonald decisions. There's a role that the Supreme Court must play in these, and what I'm curious about is, was this all in one fell swoop? Hey, we're not going to take these 10 one decision, or were they taken piece by piece and then announced together?
So how this works is we know which days they're going to be releasing opinions, and we know which days they're going to be releasing orders. So these were orders. These were not opinions about, they don't say we're taking them. They don't vote. It just says denied, okay? And so these orders come out 9:30 in the morning on Mondays, for example. The orders come out. So yesterday we were all at our lab looking through either the Supreme Court website, SCOTUS blog, wherever you go for the latest news. And this order drops, and that's it. And you scan through and you look into the cases or the numbers of the cases. Those of us who are tracking it have all the numbers handy, and you look through and it's just denied, 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 denied all at once with no rationale, with no vote. And the same thing happened. I think this is your next thing that you want to transition to is with qualified immunity. And it's not just for cops, it's for all government officials. And this is a judge-made doctrine. This isn't a federal law or a constitutional standard, that you basically can't hold government officials liable for violating whether they be the Fourth Amendment, unreasonable search and seizure, First Amendment, censoring your speech, or anything else, unless it's clearly established that violation. The way that clearly established has been interpreted is that exact scenario has happened before and been adjudged to be wrong. And so, again, 8 cases that they denied of that qualified immunity realm, despite kind of a cross-ideological panoply of briefs from the left to the right, asking the court to revisit this doctrine, which was invented by the activist Warren Court in the 60s because they were changing rules of criminal procedure on the fly and didn't want to hold police to them willy-nilly.
Well, what's so striking, I mean, you talk about how there are two sides that are particularly intrigued by the idea, to say the least, of getting rid of qualified immunity, Justice Sotomayor and Justice Thomas, left and right. And prime examples of a more left of the ideological spectrum here are the jurisprudential spectrum, and then on the right, they're both skeptics of, if not outright opposed to, the idea of qualified immunity, which goes to show that there is an interesting coalescence of forces that can come behind this. So, well, two questions. One, first of all, when you say judge-made doctrine, what do you mean by that judge-made doctrine? And number two, how could we see this just decline by the court in terms of taking this up if you do see such a broad spectrum that is interested in getting rid of this left and right?
Yeah, and it's not just Thomas and Sotomayor. Gorsuch has written about this. Ginsburg has joined Sotomayor. I mean, this is one of these things where it's kind of the left and the right against the middle, or the principled against the pragmatic, if you will. Although in yesterday's denials, there was a dissent of these cases from the denial by Thomas. Sotomayor did not write separately. It doesn't mean that everyone else agreed. They don't have to notate again how they vote. But there was only noted with opinion dissent by Thomas. And with the gun cases, I should have added, with the Second Amendment cases, there was a dissent by Thomas and Kavanaugh. Now, again, it doesn't mean that Gordo agreed or what have you, but that's just what we saw above the surface of the iceberg. So why is this a judge-made doctrine? Because judges made it up. This is in this Title VII case, the employment discrimination, where we're talking about a federal statute. This is not like the Second Amendment, where it's a constitutional provision that we're interpreting and applying. This is a series of decisions, as I said, in the 60s, giving this type of immunity, not absolute immunity. Judges, for example, and prosecutors enjoy darn near absolute immunity for what they do, but for police, school administrators, this often comes up in the context of school administrators, they're given what's called qualified immunity. That is, they're immune from liability. This is not a criminal law thing about punishing police brutality and charging police with murder or anything like that. This is about civil suits for violating your rights, whatever kinds you might allege, by government officials. And it says those officials will not be liable unless there's clearly established law that they can't act the way that that's been interpreted, as I said, is, essentially, well, that officer has not applied that particular style of chokehold on a rainy Tuesday in March, on this side of the road. It gets pretty darn granular.
And finally, in terms of what we're seeing across the country in this regard of, on this topic of qualified immunity and so forth with regards to police. Is this something then that the legislature can take up to address, especially as more and more citizens are in an uproar, whether it's Congress or state legislatures?
Absolutely. And here, certainly the state legislatures can to put in whatever kind of or remove whatever kind of immunities, privileges, defenses they like. But I would argue that Congress, the federal, under Section 5 of the 14th Amendment, which gives Congress the power to enforce people's civil rights, that Congress could pass laws saying that for federal cases, at least, if you're making an allegation of a violation of your federal constitutional or statutory right, then this is how we're qualified immunity, or we're limiting it altogether. So there's definitely now room for both Congress and state legislatures to act.
Again, Ilya Shapiro, our guest from the Cato Institute here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Last question for you. It seems stunning to me, given the gravity of the immunity topic and also of the constitutionally protected right to keep and bear arms in the Second Amendment, that the Supreme Court would decline to take up such significant issues. What do you think motivates that?
Well, John Roberts' whole project is to get the court out of the political discourse. And he thinks that the less the court decides, the fewer controversial cases the court takes, the better. But again, either the left or the right could force his hand. I wish they were doing more of that. And if you want to hear more of that kind of analysis, Jimmy, if you don't mind, I'll plug a book I have coming out in 3 months in September called Supreme Disorder, Judicial Nominating Politics of America's Highest Court, available for pre-order on Amazon.
Ilya Shapiro, these are fascinating times, and while I agree with the Supreme Court Chief Justice that it would be good to see a little less political discussion about the court, and for the court maybe to be involved in fewer circumstances in certain ways, there are some issues where really the Constitution is in play, and it's the Supreme Court of the United States that needs to step in. And not even just constitutional questions, as we're talking about statutory disputes. But it is good to talk with you. As always, thanks so much for joining us today.
Take care. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having my as well.
Yeah, Charlie, you cut out there for a second. So I have to say that is one of the two cutest instances that we've ever had. It's not the first instance of a little kid popping up on his or her dad's lap. John Tamney's daughter, of course, from Freedom Works. John Tamney's daughter, during his first or second interview on this program a couple months back, she did the exact same thing. So there's maybe a competition for kids on here on Jimmy at the Crossroads for cutest kid. Your kid's pretty darn cute, though. Ilya, thanks for coming on.
Must take after his mom. Thanks.
Yeah, clearly, not you. All right, once again, everybody, Ilya Shapiro joining us from the Cato Institute, director of the Center for Constitutional Studies there. And, oh, what fun. It's always good when you have a conversation that can go in the substantive legal discussion and then in other areas of conversation. I mean, that includes fun and personal stuff. And, we need to lighten up just a little bit. Just a little bit. Enjoy life. And kids certainly help do that. Before we wrap up, I want to go to our friends here and tell you about what we've got in terms of our friends at Scruffy Man. Superheroes have to look their best, Justice friends. Do you remember a superhero who wasn't well-groomed? I do. It was Chubby Thor. Odin's son was not representing, and nobody was scruffy man enough to point it out. Don't do that to your superhero, Dad. With great grooming comes great responsibility. After Dad leaves his fortress of solitude, his bathroom, he wants to come out of his dad cave, having transformed from Shaggy Man into Scruffy Man. ScruffyMan.com is your source for Dad's grooming power. Groomers assemble the beard grooming kit for men. It's got everything you need for daily grooming. The state-of-the-art MK2 razor is made from the same aluminum as the UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter. You'll think Stark himself designed it for your Iron Man. Make sure Superhero Dad is Scruffy Man. He'll look his best faster than a speeding razor. able to cut through jungles of hair in a single swipe. So log on to scruffyman.com today. You'll get free shipping for all orders over $49, and your gift will arrive quick as a flash. Use the promo code Jimmy and Shazam! You'll get an additional 20% off their discounts. That's scruffyman.com and use the promo code Jimmy at checkout. Check them out. All right, that is it for us today here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. We will be back tomorrow. It's Washington Examiner Wednesday. Lots coming up that we're working on over the next few days. We should have back on the spokesperson for the Saudi Embassy, Fahad Nazer, and much more coming up, so be sure to tune in. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger. Once again, in partnership with the Washington Examiner, our thanks to the Examiner, my thanks to Nathan Matouche, producer extraordinaire, to our guest today, Ilya Shapiro, and to you for watching. Please subscribe, youtube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads, and sign up for the Jimmy's Crossroads Club at members.JimmyAtTheCrossroads.com, or go to JimmyAtTheCrossroads.com and click on the Members tab at the top or the Crossroads Club tab at the top. Have a great day, and God bless America.